Hey, how you doing? Sorry you can't get through. Why don't you leave your name and your number and I'll get back to you. Welcome to Elk Radio. That wasn't very good, but I gave it a crack. My voice is not one for singing, my face is one for radio. Well, lately I've put out some videos, just recently actually, around the upcoming Elk webinar. And with that, I thought it'd be important just to drill down in a bit more detail, because those videos, to upload them and get them to go through, we've got all the digital and technology in the world, but sometimes it's just too slow. Whereas these radio programs are much faster and they're easy to listen to. You can turn on the car while you're driving. People talk rubbish on the radio these days anyway, so might as well whack on Elk Radio and have someone else rambling. No, seriously, what we're talking about here is important stuff, and why we encourage you to attend the Elk webinar on Wednesday the 30th of June is because we're going to talk about stuff that's relevant to you, important to you. Specifically, let's look at what the core part and the first part of our webinar will be. It's about a simple plan, about premium financial services. That means comprehensive across your total financial world. Not just providing a service to do with loans or advice or property, but actually looking at your total financial world. And wouldn't it be beautiful? And part of my strategy is to look 50 years ahead and go, where is the world going and what does it need? And then do it now, because then you're ahead of things. Some of them you're going to be too futuristic, so you turn that off. Put an amber or a red light on that. But some of it's green light, go. And I'm just going to digress, because what Elk is doing is our Elk robot. So Elk is who we are. It's our why. We do this to help people get the life they deserve. How we do that is our Elk robot. And I believe that in the near future, it will just be done for you. It will just be done. So all those requests for information, those painful source documents and getting that information, which is a real pain in the ass, let's be honest, will just be done. It'll be there. Because the feeds are there. It can be done already. And we're going to do it. We're going to have in our Elk robot. So Elk robot's going to be a robot. It's going to be AI. It's going to be something that just always gives you what you need. So you give us your data and we'll give you what you need. And for our first batch of Elk members, our long-serving Elk members, we're going to build that robot for you and give it to you. And we're going to show you how, by having your data in there, you'll constantly know what you need to do, where your opportunities are, where your issues are. So let's look at that. So having all your cash flow feed through there, we can see the cash flow analysis. We can see where money's going, what your expense percentages are, where you're spending too much, where you're missing on opportunities to save, what you can save if you turn some of those expenses off. Then, what do you need to do with those savings? Well, you can use that to direct towards debt reduction, or you can use it to invest, to get ahead. And then from there, where your other opportunities are. For example, are you saving tax? Do you have your tax minimisation advantage form in place? So the 1515 withholding form, to get your tax back more regularly. Well, why do you need it? Because you're paying interest on your loans. More cash flow more regularly through your loan helps you reduce your debt. So do it. It's a good behaviour. Yeah, the lump sum tax refund at the end of the year is a good thing, but getting it back more regularly is smarter. It's a better behaviour. And all of that cash flow compounding works for you. So we want to work your data. We want your data so we can show you what you need to do when you need to do it. Because the honest situation that I see is most people don't know what to do or when to do it, and they leave it too late. And that's why we have these issues in Australia where people don't have what they need for their retirement, because no one is there helping them all the time. The future will be different. The future will change that, because you'll have it at your fingertips. You'll know when you need to do something. And then it'll be like choose your own adventure. To a degree. We're not going to let you make mistakes. We're going to help you make sure that what you choose fits your needs and you can't hurt yourself. So our Elk robot will be always working on your data, and you'll be seeing pop-ups and saying, well, this is what you need to do. Hey, have you considered this? You should be doing this. You could save this. And as simple as your interest rate is 2.8%. It could be 1.74, for example, fixed. Would you like to do that? Would you like to correct that? Yes, and then follow the pathway. We'll make it as easy as possible. We're going to remove the friction. Then from there, it's looking at opportunities for the savings and the cash flow that can be freed up. And then what can you do with that? Well, if you chose to, based on the valuation of your property, based on the loan amounts that you owe money on, that means you've got this much equity. We don't expect you to use all of that, nor should you. However, if you use a bit of that, you could go and do this. It would allow you to acquire an asset that's going to plug in this kind of rental yield, it's going to plug in this kind of tax savings, give you this kind of growth prospect opportunity over the medium to long term. Here's what it would look like. And we'll show you an avatar. So your Elk robot will be you. That's you in the real life. Then we'll show you an avatar, which is what you would look like if you did that. So remember that movie Avatar? Where he was himself, the Australian actor, and he stepped into the avatar by getting in the machine, and then he ran this life and lived this life. Well, we show what your life could be if you did those things. Then you can choose, as I said, your own adventure. You go, well, you know what, I want to do that. And that will help you eliminate the gaps, the lag, and always be working, because you've always got to work your money. Life is hard, it's expensive, and you can't be inefficient. Otherwise, you're just not going to have what you need. You have to work for longer. So back to the seminar, because that sounds good, doesn't it, Elk Robot? And that's what we're doing. We're doing it now, and that's where we want to change the way things are done. So keep an eye out, and we will be pushing out the Elk Robot, and we encourage you to enter your data, update your data, so we can give you better quality information, better quality service, give you what you need. Now, once that's in, then we'll start to get the feeds happening, so we can see it real time. But it takes a bit of input from you, but the benefit far outweighs that time cost. Back to the webinar. I call it a seminar, it's a webinar. We'll move to a seminar after that. So webinar in terms of looking at a simple plan. So understanding your data, understanding you. So what are your issues? What are your deficiencies? The main issues facing any household are tax, mortgage, retirement. How much tax are you paying every pay? How much tax are you paying every year? How many years have you got left to work? It's a simple mathematical formula. If you've got 30 grand a year in tax, by 20 years left working, that's $600,000. $600,000 in tax. Okay, so that money comes in, you earn that money, and obviously the gross gets tax taken out of it, so you don't see that money. It goes out, but that is your money earned. It's your personal exertion that's delivered that return. How can you save some of that? What levers can you pull to get some of that back? Because you should. Otherwise, that's a pain point that's not going to go away, and you're going to be ineffective or not as effective as possible in your plan. Tax minimization advantages should be front and center of any plan. Then, mortgage. Well, paying rent is very expensive, especially at the moment. And at the same time, it's a fair percentage of your income anyway. And if you push that across to a mortgage, well, it's an expensive home loan debt. It's not tax deductible. What's your mortgage payment? Well, rates will be like this, I'd expect. Now, we can't forecast. No one knows what rates are going to do. And so this is not a guarantee. It's simply what I think. That rates will be like this for at least the next 2 or 3 years. But rates will have to move. And doesn't that lead you to one thought in terms of what will happen in those suburbs in particular, in Sydney and Melbourne, that are under mortgage pressure because their prices are so expensive? Those prices are so expensive. Like the average prices in some of the suburbs in Melbourne, you have to be a millionaire. You have to own, and to pay an average of $2.6 or $3 million. And to get into Sydney, it's much the same. So what's the mortgage value? Then from there, what would happen if rates go up? So I do believe, unless you're in that middle of the bell curve, for the affordable part of most working Australians, that if you're not in that bell curve, so if your property prices aren't in that bell curve, you should expect that your property prices, the cycle of that value, will be more susceptible to up and down movement. So that leads me to think more in terms of, so just think this is a brainstorming Elk Radio, because I'm just free-flowing all the things that go through my mind, and thank God you're not me. Because you must think about much more interesting stuff than I do. But in terms of where that will go, well, I believe that the traditional real estate model is dead, and I just don't know it yet. That it's dead and it needs to be brought back to life in a way that's better suited and better valued to their customer, their consumer, the homeowner, the property owner. How has property commissions got to 3% of the sale price when all they've done is do the same job they've done 10 years ago? How does that work? Have you been paid that equivalent increase by doing the same job? No. They've rode the back of rising property prices for too long. Elk is changing that. So we believe there's a space before the real estate agent. We believe there's a space that exists, and it's quite a big space that we can slot into, to give people the data and analytics they need to know what their property's worth, because they need to know. Rather than calling 3 real estate agents to come in, and I found it interesting, I won't say the gentleman's name, but he put a podcast out, and his whole message, or one of the main messages, certainly advertised message in the podcast, was tell the truth. Well, really? Did you have to tell that industry that they need to tell the truth? Isn't it just part of your obligation to do that? And so you get 3 people that have to be encouraged to tell the truth, to give you a market appraisal on what they think it's worth, and then you make a decision on that because of how many flyers they're putting in your letterbox, how many signboards they've got up in the area. Does that make them an expert? No, it just means they're talking to other people, and more people than perhaps others. Does not make them an expert on what your property is worth and then how to sell it. Because there are plenty of high quality operators out there that do good volumes, that have better systems and better processes. And that's where we feel the space is, where we believe that prior to that step of engaging an agent, that if you work with Elk, you'll know real time what your property is worth. You'll get a feed, a constant cycle of looking at the trends, the up and downs, what's the sales in that area, but more importantly, a real tracker of what the property is worth in its up and down, and you'll need that. Because you'll need to justify and verify that in the future. Because it's no longer about just getting on the bandwagon and paying those rising prices. It's about someone making an informed decision about what property is worth and then tying it to data or to facts. A bit like a stock exchange. So why isn't property sold on an exchange? It should be. Where people are able to verify what it's worth, and wouldn't that give you that transparency then? That still in the best interest of the owner, the seller, and the buyer, to get what they believe the property is worth and exchange on that basis. So where people can see where the property prices have gone to and from, what's supporting that, and then making transparent offers that the buyer can see, that they can go in and actually see in their system. Okay, this is what properties, what I've been offered, this is the feedback, this is the notes. So obviously respecting Chinese walls privacy and getting that right. But so people can then have full transparency of what's happening in the sale of their property. And then tying it back to a fixed cost. So there's going to be a fixed cost. There's always a fixed cost to deliver a service. And there's always an acceptable profit and risk factor. So then working out what that is. And from there, there's got to be performance fee. Because if someone does a good job, they deserve to be rewarded. Because it's a win-win outcome. And so having a fixed fee plus performance fee allows then a much more valuable type of outcome for the seller, for the agent. It's not going to be 3% of, and it's not going to be 3% of $3 million. It's not going to be 3% of $1.5 million. It'll be more money in your pocket. And that's a win-win. Because the agent's getting what they should, and agents are focused on one thing: selling property and making as much money as possible. I saw an advertisement that came out the other day. Hey, we've sold $1 billion in property. Great. Not once in that message did I see about we've helped this many people. So, 2 things. Elk Robot. Use it to own your data, to know what you need to do. Give us your data and we'll tell you what you need to do. We'll show you what you need to do. We'll share with what you need to do. You're in control and you'll know when you need to do it. Because that's where the world's going. On that note, accounting. Is that another industry that's dead and doesn't even know it? And so for businesses, where do you get your advice? Why do you get your advice from an accountant? So Elk Business, where we can talk and really understand the diagnostic, so do a diagnostic on a business. Actually then look at where their issues are, where their needs are, what are they doing, how can they do that better, getting the advice they need. Not just tax advice, not just advice from an accountant because they're an accountant, but someone who's a business advisor, an expert that knows that industry, knows that segment, and they can go in and actually help them as part of their business as well as their total financial world. It doesn't have to refer them off to different parties. They can facilitate that one solution. So Elk Robot, Elk Property, Elk Business. It's what I've been wanting to get to. Based on my background, I used to look after commercial banking for a major bank for a number of years. So that dealing in deals up to $100 million is where I found who I am, where I got my expertise along with everything else that helped me get to that point. And I want to help businesses. I want to help business owners take that business to where it needs to be and allow them to get it to work and perform and be what they dreamed of. And so our mission, our why, is to help working Australian families put in place a plan that can be managed, that's simple, it's easy, they know what it looks like, they know what it needs to do. And that could look like, let's paint a picture. It could be in your personal world. You need to put in place A fully transactional, a term, so with your home loan, let's go back a step. If you've got a home loan, look at that home loan. Can you put in place a loan that you've got better control over? That's the right type of loan facility. Allows you to put as much cash flow as regularly as possible through that loan. So reducing debt, how do you do that? Well, you put in place a term loan with unlimited free redraw and a fully transactional 100% offset account attached. From there, you need to make sure you're pumping as much cash flow as regularly as possible through that offset account. Well, how do you do that? Why can't you put more money through it? Well, I've put all the earnings I've got into it. That's all I can earn from my personal position. Can you put more cash flow through it? Well, of course you can. You can take steps to get access to more cash flow. If your circumstances allow, you can save tax and put more cash flow through there. So you then look at, well, what are your options? And so there's shares, there's cash at bank, or there's property. Shares are a great asset. The majority of people have shares in their super, and I would not suggest that people borrow money to invest in shares. It's an up and down kind of roller coaster ride. And where that asset best be held is perhaps in super, or in some people's circumstances where they've got savings or surplus cash flow, in a fund that they just put that money into, but certainly not borrowing to do that. So then cash, well, cash is delivering, I found this interesting, I saw an offer for one of the major banks. Invest now for 0.4%. Really? Who is doing that? Who is putting their money to work for 0.4%? And I'd like to speak with them, because is there not a better solution? I understand certainly the need to have money in cash at bank, but you can't just do that, because that's not even in line with inflation. And that goes back to then interest rates, where interest rates are so low. Have you got an interest rate risk management plan where you're fixing a portion of your debt and keeping a portion of your debt variable if you're trying to pay it off? And then on your investment loans, if you've got investment debt, are you reviewing that? Because investment loans attached to investment property, well, that's a return on investment conversation. It's looking at the costs. How can I reduce costs? Well, two ways. If you're an investment property, pick your manager better. If you're paying 7.5%, 8.5%, you're paying too much. And that's the other part of our property solution. How do you know what your property is worth? Yeah, that's a more widely recognised kind of proposal. And we're not just going to focus on that. We're going to give you real-time feedback, real-time data, and we're going to help you understand real-time when you should sell, what it looks like, and then model that. And give you the ability to support your valuation, because the way property prices are going, the cycle of property, especially in the upper end, away from that middle bell curve, the middle of that bell curve where the Australian working families mostly sit, is going to be more susceptible to price fluctuation. And so we'll see cycles, and people want better data to make their decisions on. But what about rent? How do you know you're getting the best rental yield? How many rental managers have actually really driven and increased your rent recently? How many have pushed for more when the opportunity's been available to? I don't know that I've seen many. I know for Elks, but from Elks we certainly have. We're getting increases of $50 and plus a week. More than that, taking rental yields from 5% to 6% to 6.3% gross rental yield. So if you're getting a 6.3% gross rental yield and you're paying what, 2% interest rate, wow, look at that cash flow. Seriously, it's superb. So from there, you need to look at, well, if it's a balanced investment vehicle, is there tax savings as well? Really? Can I get one of those? What? I have 12. Well, that should be the conversation. Obviously subject to affordability. We're not as flippant as that, of course. But I did make my point. So what I'm saying is that as part of a simple plan, it's about reducing debt. It's about managing cash flow. It's about understanding your opportunities and your needs for a simple plan. And then with that going, well, what are my options, as I was saying? Shares, property, investments, for example. And shares, property, investments can look like, and I might have my headpiece is having a slight malfunction here, guys. I'm going to continue. So shares, property, cash at bank. We talked about cash at bank, we talked about shares. Now, with property, well, you've got to make sure that it's valued for bank mortgage purposes, and that's got the right fundamentals and criteria. And then from there, if it's affordable inside your price points, then over the medium to long term, it's an asset that will give you a foundation of tax savings, rental income, and growth prospect over the medium to long term. And as long as it's, again, within those price points, they're not pushing the extremes. that have more meat on the bone opportunities. For example, within 30 odd kilometres of Brisbane, for example, within 30 odd minutes, 30 to 40 odd minutes of Brisbane. I'm not suggesting there's an area that you should go into, but it's an area that has strong fundamentals, because if you look at the average price of that location compared to the average price of Sydney and Melbourne, yeah, well, why is it different? Brisbane's a world-class city. It's a metropolis. And the infrastructure and the earning capacity and the earnings of people in that area, they're no different. So why are those values at that level? It simply means that they haven't moved previously at the same rate or in the same way. But that's opportunity, isn't it? And so you've got to find out that opportunity before it's too late. And with it all, that's what you'll get. So in terms of our upcoming ELK seminar, we'll talk through a simple plan. But it's not just simple in the form of, okay, hey, do this. By example, just refinance your loan. Or put your cash flow here. We're smarter than that. We're able to make something that's going to deliver you what you need simple. Where you might plug in an asset, and that asset may be a growth asset such as direct property into your personal wealth. And if you draw a circle and your total financial wealth is represented by that circle, that's your total financial wealth, your personal wealth, your super, divide it down the middle. In your personal financial wealth, you plug in an asset such as property. And then that comes with rental income, tax savings and growth if it's the right kind of asset, what kind of fundamentals. That's going to start doing a job for you, and we'll look at what those cash flows mean and what they look like at the moment. Rental income of say 6%, tax savings of up to $35,000, $40,000 a year in tax deductions, not savings, deductions. And then that could attribute to $3 to $5 grand in additional in tax savings for you presently, depending on your income. It could be more. And that's money that you get that you were going to pay otherwise because of that asset. And then growth over the medium to long term. From there, you go, well, in my super, what could I do there? Depending on your balance, your resources, your behaviours, your drivers. It might be that you would look to farm that money, to put in place a portfolio that best suits you, that's actively managed. But that's considering costs, of course. A barbell portfolio where, imagine you got, well, the Tokyo Olympics are coming up, and what a great time. We've got the European Football Championships, got the Copa America, South American Football Championships, the Tour de France coming up, got the Tokyo Olympics coming up. Well, seriously, I'm thinking about changing our business hours from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. and sleeping during the day, because I just love that. So the barbell portfolio, back to that. Imagine you're doing weights, and well, you're watching someone at Tokyo Olympics lifting a barbell. Better. I'd rather do that than watch. I'd rather watch someone do it than actually do the weights myself. Of course, I don't mind going for a run. That's my thing. So with that, maybe to pay tribute to one of those great Turkish weightlifters. They're in front of the bar. And on the left-hand side of the bar is the biggest weight on the bar. On the right-hand side of the bar are some smaller weights. So the big weight on the bar, in this instance, might be a low-cost core holding. So what's your core holding? And maybe a fund that's diversified across the different types of assets, Australian shares, international shares, listed property, cash, that type of stuff, is where you put that, or what type of asset it is. And it might be an index fund. It's there to mimic or mirror the market and achieve what the market, so what traditional assets are there to do over the medium and long term. That means it's low cost. And then from there, you look at, well, with the other money on the right-hand side of the bar, what can I do with that? Well, you can look at some specialist managers to try and chase or achieve alpha return. So you put a slice of that. So it's a smaller weight. So the weight on the left-hand side of the bar might be 100 kilos. The weight on the right-hand side might be a mixture of 20, 20, 10, 10, 5. So you're slicing that money up, put it into specialist managers to do a job. And they're not correlated. So in the example I've just given, we've got an index fund on the left and other assets on the right. Well, there's some correlation there. But what if you could take a look and go, wait a second, based on my resources, my balance and my income, my drivers, my behaviours and my financial literacy, maybe taking control of my super, because 9.5% of my money going to 12% is going to that. That's $2 in every 20 I earn. What if I looked at managing that myself with the help of experts and professionals, and that's not something that's onerous, in the form of a self-managed fund. And that's not for everyone. But let's just look at what that would look like. Well, you might go, well, a direct property acquisition, so the smart way to invest in property maybe is using super. Again, looking at the cash flows and making sure the projections justify it, along with other considerations, but plugging in an asset on the left-hand side of the bar that's completely not correlated to the right-hand side. So a big low-cost core holding on the left, and then the usual suspects on the right. And the bar that holds it together is insurance. So that would certainly be a barbell portfolio that does a job for you. So all of a sudden you've got, say, $700,000 invested in the market versus $250,000, $300,000 to start with. And more money in the market, achieving relative or similar returns, will deliver a bigger dollar figure. That's even with some borrowing involved, especially when you look at the cash flows and the right level of interest rate and the right deposit. So it's getting that part right. But back to what I was saying in terms of even just farming it. Having a barbell portfolio that allows you to put in place an index fund, for example, on the left, and specialist managed on the right, with as least amount of correlation as possible. The bar that holds it together is your insurance, your risk protection, and then growing it for a purpose. Now, I will also just digress again to perhaps why you should join us. A little while ago, I talked about Elk Invest and using private personal monies to build our fund. And this is not publicly available. It's not for retail clients. It's what we're doing at the moment outside of our advice to our clients. Just for the last month. So the last month's return is 9.38%. But some of the assets up 17%. Across the whole, 9.38% return. So that's in 1 month. Extrapolate that out over 12 months. Obviously it's going to deliver like that, and we plan on continuing to actively manage it. But that's just a snippet of why you should talk with Elk, and why being an Elk member will have its values, and certainly offers its values. We'd love to have you join us at the upcoming Elk webinar. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day. Cheers.